The Chinese nationalist revolutionary Dr. Sun Yat-sen was a Chinese Christian. His Christian faith and his conviction in Jesus Christ was something which was very clear from the beginning of his life to the end of his life, and an identity which was very well documented by Dr. Sun Yat-sen's own writings and books. It was also an identity which Dr. Sun Yat-sen oftentimes was disparaged for by his rivals in China. At the time, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it was not popular for a Chinese person to become a Christian. Chinese people who converted to Christianity were oftentimes seen as the enemy who converted to a hostile foreign religion. Christianity was seen as a hostile foreign force by many Chinese people at the time. Sun Yat-sen himself was ridiculed or criticized by many of his opponents and rivals in the Chinese political world then. But as it says in the Bible, if the world hates you, keep in mind they hated Jesus Christ first. If Christians belong to the world will love you as its own. But Christians do not belong to the world. Christians belong to the path of following Jesus. The morals, ethics, and teachings of the Christian faith might not always be in direct alignment with the morals, values, and teachings of whatever the mainstream society, mainstream popular culture, and the latest trends and fashions might be. Thus, as a result, Christians naturally are revolutionaries. Jesus was a revolutionary. Jesus rebelled against the Pharisees. Dr. Sun Yat-sen rebelled against the established order in China during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which was holding the Chinese people back then. And today, in the 21st century, and even all throughout the history of Christianity, all Christian people rebel against the social values, the popular culture, the mainstream culture, which do not align with the Christian virtues. To give an idea of what China was like, what the spiritual landscape of China was like back then during the 19th and 20th centuries, at the time, most Chinese people followed a form of Chinese paganism. Those of you who follow my channel, who do not come from a Chinese cultural background, probably have never encountered Chinese pagan religions before. But I have grown up in a Chinese cultural environment. I grew up in Chinese folk religion. And let me tell you, Chinese folk religion is extremely superstitious and breeds a psychology of fatalism and fear. Oftentimes, Chinese folk religion involves lots of divination. That is this concept that you should consult with a shaman, a fortune teller, a feng shui master to determine your fortune, your future, and what your life may hold. For example, many Chinese people believe in feng shui. That is this idea that there's a flow of energy in the world that follows certain geographic features. If your house, your business, or your ancestral grave is positioned at a certain geographic feature at a certain angle, and it's at a bad position, you might encounter misfortune in your finances or health. On the other hand, if it's positioned at a good geographic feature, maximizing the intake of qi, then you might experience really great fortune and very great health and financial consequences. Chinese folk religion sometimes also involve divination in the form of fortune telling. You can go to the Chinese temple and ask for your future to be told through looking at a zodiac reading, through looking at numerology, through astrology. For example, one common practice is pulling out a stick with the inscription out of a series of sticks, out of a bundle of sticks. And using that inscription, the temple master can use a manual along with your time and date of birth to determine whether your next season in life would be prosperous or not. Many Chinese also pray to idols. Idols of a horse, idols of an animal, idols of certain deities which they believe to exist. In southern China, there are forms of witchcraft even, I would dare to say. In Hong Kong, for example, there's a concept called Da Xiu Yan. That is when you would hire a witch to curse or hex somebody whom you do not like. You would go to the witch with a representation of the person whom you want to curse, and the witch will ask this spirit or that spirit to attack this person and to harm this person spiritually. That was what Chinese people believed in back then, and what many Chinese people still believe in to this day. I mean, even today in the 21st century, lots of Chinese people would spend millions of dollars to move their ancestral graves from one mountain to the next mountain to maximize the flow of qi, to maximize their feng shui benefits. Lots of Chinese investors and corporations in places like Southeast Asia would pay millions of dollars to design their high-rise buildings a certain way so that the skyline would not be blocking the feng shui to the city or something like that, right? There's all these stories of how many Chinese people take feng shui extremely seriously, even today in the 21st century. How they take many of these superstitions very seriously even in the 20th century. Imagine 120 years ago during the days of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And what this type of psychology breeds is a spirit of fear, a spirit of fatalism that, oh man, my zodiac, my horoscope, my astrology, my numerology tells me that I'm going to have a bad season. There's no hope. I'm just going to, it's over for me. There's no hope. It's a sense of fear. It's a sense of fatalism. I don't want to offend that spirit. I don't want to offend this deity. Oh, my zodiac prediction says this. My feng shui says that. But came Christianity. Came Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ came to China. Jesus Christ arrived, the missionaries arrived, and they gave an alternative intellectual framework to question these superstitions. They gave an alternative intellectual framework which taught that you should only believe in one God who takes care of everything, who forbids the practice of divination, fortune-telling, astrology, zodiac, who forbids idol worship, meaning that you should not only not be allowed to make an idol representing different deities, but you should also not make an idol of worshiping your money, your job, your occupation, your vices. But instead, just have your faith in Jesus, have your faith in that one God, and have that one God take care of everything. So in a sense, Jesus Christ offered freedom for the Chinese. Freedom from the spirit of fear, freedom from this superstition which plagued China for thousands of years, this error which plagued the Chinese people for thousands of years. Dr. Sun Yat-sen, in the 19th century, wanted to save China from ignorance. He saw that China was a backwards country which could not modernize because the Manchurian dynasty was not interested in reform. He saw that the masses of Chinese people were ignorant and superstitious, who were not interested in self-bettering or self-improving themselves or changing or reforming their worldview or revolutionizing the worldview. So Sun Yat-sen said, hey, look, Christianity is giving me this alternative worldview that offers me freedom. So I'm going to become a Christian. I want to be a I want to be an upright Chinese Christian. I want to be an upright Christian. He was baptized in 1884. Sun Yat-sen and his friend Lu Haodong, who was also baptized, went to their home village in Guangdong, southern China, to try to interact with the local villagers there, try to teach the local villagers there of this new worldview which they have learned. But they saw that the local people in their hometown were worshiping idols. The people in their hometown were so convinced that these idols, this giant rock in the middle of the town square, gave them fortune, gave them some kind of spiritual power. So frustrated was Sun Yat-sen and Lu Haodong of this superstition, they smashed up that rock, they smashed up the idols in the entire town hall, and they ran away before the angry mobs were able to capture them. Then Sun Yat-sen and Lu Haodong went to Guangzhou and many of the different towns and counties in southern China to try to recruit like-minded modernizers and reformers who wanted to save China. They were not very successful. Lu Haodong was captured by the Qing Dynasty Manchurian army and he was executed. He was beheaded. Sun Yat-sen then went overseas to look for like-minded Chinese people outside of China, overseas. In 1896, he traveled to London. And while in London, Dr. Sun Yat-sen was kidnapped by Manchurian secret agents. He was then held in the back room of the Chinese embassy, where he was scheduled to be sent back to China to be executed. Now, knowing how barbaric the Manchurian dynasty of China was back in the 19th century, most likely Sun Yat-sen would have been convicted of high treason and he would have been sentenced to death by 1,000 slices. That is when they would slice you one body part at a time until you died. During his capture, Sun Yat-sen managed to sneak a note to a British employee named Mrs. Howe and also another British employee named George Cole. This note was sent to Sun Yat-sen's former teacher, Dr. James Cantil, who then managed to petition the British Foreign Ministry to pressure the Chinese government to release Dr. Sun after a week. But during that 1 week of captivity in the embassy, Sun Yat-sen had no way of knowing if he was going to be sent back to China. He had no way of knowing if his note actually got through. He had no way of knowing whether he was going to live or die by the end of next week. But after his release, Sun Yat-sen credited his salvation to God. Sun Yat-sen wrote a book which was titled Kidnapped in London, in which he recalled, "While I was in prison, I believe I was certainly going to die. In despair, one calls out to heaven. In pain, one cries out for one's parents. This is human nature. At the time, I could do nothing but feel a deep remorse and pray with all sincerity. For 6 or 7 days in a row, I prayed day and night without stopping. The more I prayed, the more earnest my prayers became. On the 7th day, I suddenly felt comfort in my heart, completely free of worry. It was not something I had expected or planned. It came naturally. I said to myself, this prayer had been answered. God has shown his grace." Following his release, Sun Yat-sen went back to China. And in 1911, finally, the Manchurian dynasty was overthrown and the Republic of China, the ROC, was established in 1912. Sun Yat-sen became the first president. And what he tried to do was implement a constitutional government, the idea that there should be a rule of law system which would guarantee the Chinese people's civil rights, the idea that Chinese people should have human dignity and human rights protected by the legal system. For the Chinese society then, this was a completely revolutionary concept. Remember, China had an emperor for 4,000 years prior. Remember, the Chinese emperor was an autocrat. He could do whatever he wanted. The Chinese emperor could appoint whoever he wanted to be the governors, the mayors, the chiefs. And these officials can govern and rule over people and lord over people however they like, just like a medieval fiefdom. Throughout the 4,000 years of Chinese history, occasionally some very draconian philosophies emerge to dominate the masses by these officials, like legalism. But Sun Yat-sen's idea of civil rights came from his Christian influences, because Christianity advocates that every single human being has an intrinsic value, that every human being has a worth. But despite his Christian faith and his zeal for this faith, Sun Yat-sen also oftentimes would insist that he wanted to combine many of the virtues taught in the traditional Chinese values with Christianity, which he found compatible. For example, Confucianism, which stresses benevolence towards one another, was found to be compatible by Sun Yat-sen and even Chinese thinkers and philosophers prior to him. Sun Yat-sen once said that China has an inherent morality, and only with morality can the country be saved, and only with morality can the world be saved. Therefore, to restore a nation's status, besides uniting as a single country, we have to restore our inherent morality also. Dr. Sun said that China has a traditional ethics based on Yao Shen Yu Wen Wu Zhao Gong Kong Zi. Confucius mentions one after another my ideas to inherit this tradition and demonstrate its brilliance to the world. Yao Shen Yu were 3 mythological Chinese emperors who were extremely moral and virtuous during the rule of China thousands of years ago. And according to the Chinese legend, their virtues are codified by Confucius much later on and passed down from one generation to the next. In the 3 principles of the people, which was Sun Yat-sen's philosophy to govern China, nationalism, civil rights, people's livelihood, Sun Yat-sen oftentimes referenced the concept of the Da Tong, the Great Unity Society, which is another Confucian concept in which people would care for one another, very similar to the concept of universal love and the fraternity of Christianity. Sun Yat-sen died on March 31st, 1925. On his deathbed, he left a will, and he said to his close family, gathered beside his bed, that I am a Christian. I was sent by God to wage war against the devil. Even in death, I want others to know that I am a Christian. Sun Yat-sen's son, Sun He, confirmed that this was said at his deathbed. The day before my father died, He testified that I was a Christian. I have fought the devil for over 40 years. You should also fight in the same way and have faith in God. But the great tragedy of China's story was that after Sun Yat-sen died, the country went backwards. Due to the historic circumstances, Sun Yat-sen invited communists into his political movement by the late 1920s. In the late 1920s, he needed money, funding, and weapons to continue the Chinese Revolution. The only faction willing to support him were the Russian communists, the Bolsheviks. So Sun made a deal to invite them into the Chinese nationalist movement. The communists were extremely anti-Christian. After destroying Orthodox Christianity in Russia for 10 years, they then came to China. And while in China, they also tried to erase Christianity in China. Did you know that Mikhail Borodin, the Bolshevik advisor to the Chinese Nationalist Party, wanted to stop the Sun family from conducting a Christian funeral? Song Qingling, who was Sun Yat-sen's widow, defected to the communists in the 1930s and 40s. And in a letter to Israel Epstein, another communist international agent, she denied Sun Yat-sen's faith, saying that he never believed in any God. When the communists took over China from 1949 to 1979, during the first 30 years of their reign, they taught the Chinese people hatred through their concepts of class struggle and liquidation. They mobilized Chinese masses to fight one another based on whatever their identities were. This guy was a businessman. That guy was a clergyman. That guy was a Catholic sister, a Catholic nun. Go struggle against them. Go destroy them. That person was a Confucian scholar. Go destroy them. That was what happened during the Cultural Revolution. These angry mobs were unleashed in society with hatred in their eyes, destroy all the well-cultivated and educated people of the Chinese society. Lots of families were broken up in China during this time. During the Cultural Revolution, sons and daughters snitched on their parents and had their parents persecuted. Even the Sun and Song families were split up. Song Qingling, Sun Yat-sen's widow, went to the communists and stayed in mainland China. Song Mei-ling and Song Ai-ling, her other two sisters, went to Taiwan. They never saw each other ever again because of these politics. Sun He, Sun Yat-sen's son, went to Taiwan, never went back to mainland China ever again after 1949. The entire Chinese community was scattered because of communism. Then, when the communist experiment failed, they did reform and opening up. They introduced the market economy with all the worst of the excesses of capitalism and materialism injected into the minds of the Chinese people, where the morals and ethics became inverted. That's what communism did to the Chinese people. And what about today in the 21st century? You might say, well, today in the 21st century, China's strong and rich and powerful now, right? Well, the Chinese communists, they have basically made a religion out of themselves. They have made an idol out of the party. The Communist Party is the idol of worship now. Masses of Chinese people are deceived to practice idolatry, to worship the picture of Mao Zedong, to worship the idol of Mao Zedong, to worship the portrait of Xi Jinping, to bow. There's video clips of Chinese people bowing to a picture or a statue of Mao Zedong or Xi Jinping. The red culture are the idols and the idolatry of the Chinese people today, the errors of the Chinese people today. And if this continues, the People's Republic of China will go down the same path as the Qing dynasty of 18th and 19th centuries. A state with centralized totalitarian power that made an idol of its own leaders and keeps the people in fear. May the Chinese people rediscover the virtues of Yat Sen, Yu Wen Wu, Zhao Gong Kong Ji of our Chinese sages, proclaimed by Sun Yat-sen, and may the Chinese people also learn and come to understand the social teachings fulfilled in the life of Jesus Christ. Amen.